Even NASA gets a do-over every now and then. They're trying this one again. In 2 minutes, the Antares Rocket will launch to the International Space Station from Virginia. You're seeing the launch happening, the setup for it live right now. That mission was scrubbed last night. We were watching, waiting to see if it was going to happen. That's because a sailboat was in range of the launch. There was concern about what might fall off the rocket that launches from Wallops Island. Now, this rocket has a Cygnus spacecraft. It's filled with supplies. They are waiting anxiously aboard the International Space Station for there. And this is the third resupply mission for Orbital Sciences Corporation based out in Dulles. They work along with SpaceX, contracted by NASA to send all this stuff to the International Space Station. And you might even be able to see it for yourself. Last night, the weather was a little bit better for this. Tonight, though?
Completely clear tonight. From my vantage point, I've got the camera getting tuned again in our weather camera shot here up on Roslyn, looking back east, southeast, if you will. I've got a layer of cloud cover. I'm not sure if much of the Washington area is going to be able to see this. So we may be able to, because the glow, it just kind of looks, it's going to look like a star going from, you know, the Earth, going from the ground up in the air. So there's a chance with the brightness that the plume coming from the launch that you may be able to see it. So I'm going to hopefully hope for the best. Again, my weather camera shot I've got tuned, so I'm going to closely see if I'm in the right direction. But beep, 30 seconds.
30 seconds to launch. You can tell the anticipation. You see the smoke out from the bottom of the rocket, everybody getting ready for that. Huge anticipation at NASA whenever they have one of these rocket
still
launches.
The coolest things ever. I mean,
it's amazing that we can send things to space, and boom, they're doing it right here, counting down to this launch happening right here in Virginia, which is pretty cool.
The amount of power that goes into launch, what we call escape velocity, just to get past the gravitational pull, is crazy. So let's see the launch. Let's let them take it here.
Liftoff of Antares, the Orbital 3 mission that brings Cygnus on its third CRS mission to the ISS. Got main engines at 108%.
Avionics powered on. Oh no.
Oh man, that's not good.
Oh.
Wow.
Goodness.
Let's keep in mind that is an unmanned aircraft just carrying supplies, but when NASA prepares for these launches, that's why they have to be careful.
Be advised, stay at your consoles. Everyone in the LCC, maintain your positions in your consoles. In the LCC, maintain positions at your console.
This is the reason of which last night was scrubbed, let me remind you, because of that sailboat downstream for this very situation. Safety first.
And you are watching. This was a launch supposed to happen tonight, 6:22. The Antares Rocket has had some sort of complication. This is an unmanned rocket simply carrying supplies to the International Space Station, but still very disappointing to the people at NASA. They put a lot of time and effort. These launches are a huge effort for that agency. Obviously, the resources to deal with those rockets, a lot of money put into that. And when they have a launch like this go bad, it's a giant disappointment.
Right, money involved, the local companies that are going to be involved in this, and the time, the effort that's spent to it, the engineering work. That still, there's a lot of folks behind the scenes. This is, personally, a lot of folks are tied to each one of these projects and launches. That it's going to be scores of dozens, if not hundreds, of people that watching this that happens.
And we are trying to get the video to re-cue to show you exactly what happened.
Yes, if you're just tuning into us live, we were just trying to catch the Wallops Island launch of this. There was obviously an obvious failure of the Antares rocket, as it just was seconds from liftoff coming in. Failure, an explosion, and what appears to be a complete loss of this capsule as it was trying to make the International Space Station visit.
And you are looking at live footage from Wallops Island in Virginia. Obvious flames happening there. The camera before at a distance made it tougher to see, but now you can see some real charred damage there. Obvious flames, smoke, everything happening at this launch site where there has been, I guess you have to call it a massive failure, and still explosions happening there on the launch pad.
The procedure that they're going to have, I'm sure there's got to be a lot of things in place. Automatic shutdowns, fire procedures, I'm sure that have to be kicking in place. You can hear.
And if you're just joining us, this again a live view from the pad out at the Wallops Flight Facility, an explosion occurring shortly after liftoff of the Orbital CRS-3 mission on its way towards the station. We are standing by and will continue to bring you any updates as they come available.
we want to assure people, again, this is an unmanned rocket, as you've been saying, Josie, that there's got to be procedures in place, automatic shutdowns, routine that's in place, that this is something that the engineers, the space folks, nothing, we just got done talking about it. It's just interesting. It almost seems routine we can get to space, but any time something of the volatility, the rockets that you're launching, nothing in that sense is absolutely routine. You got to have what you call consequence plans in place. There's got to be automatic shutdowns. There's got to be firefighting routines in place. And here is the replay video that we watched live with you. We were just sitting back saying this is going to be great to watch. Let's hope this is Orbital, our local company out in Dulles, that I even know personally some of the people in the higher ups in the administration. And so let's play the video and let you watch as this came off.
And we have liftoff of Antares, the New 3 mission.
See right about here, in my mind, I thought this is something that's not right. You're going to see right here. Just a moment.
Got main engines at 100%.
Right there.
Boom.
Avionics power nominal.
I think it was not long from liftoff.
No, yeah, they definitely have a successful liftoff. Yeah, and just seconds later, a massive explosion there at the launch site at Wallops Island. This was supposed to be the third mission going up to the
launch team. Be advised, stay at your consoles. Everyone in the LCC
that's the replay from his audio saying, "Stay at your consoles." Obviously,
maintain positions.
Massive failure, explosion, as he even just said. Many times the fuel that goes into this is something you've heard from other astronauts and people going into space. You're sitting on top of a giant just explosion waiting to happen.
Absolutely.
I mean, the volatility of liquid
requires.
oxygen, I'm not sure quite the fuel mixture if it is, but as in most cases with rocket launches in our past up to now, liquid oxygen. The volatility of that is we breathe oxygen, right, as you know, right? In order to make it liquid, you have to condense it down, chill it down, really extremely cold temperatures, compression, and just as oxygen fuels the fire that you know and your fireplace and everything, if you've got the extra volatility of something you've condensed down, it's in liquid form, the oxygen that is that goes in, you combine it, they set it ablaze, and that's just the extreme explosions, controlled explosion that a rocket is as it's going in. But again, I'm not completely familiar with the fuel being solid or if it is, again, of a liquid nature and form of that. But whatever it's going to be, the volatility of any rocket going into space is extreme. And you're sitting on top of something that could at any minute do what we just saw live.
And Mission Control right now is putting out this message talking about laying out their insurance protocols, telling people to stay at their controls and secure any photographs, any data that they have, and segregate it as a result of what has been a failed launch of the Antares rocket. Supposed to go up at 6:22, but there was a failure of some sort, an explosion just a few seconds after launch. Although this does not involve any people inside the rocket, the scope of that explosion, the flames out there, I'm sure at this point they're evaluating that launch site to make sure that everybody is okay. I'm checking Twitter, looking at NASA, obviously, which had put out messages just a few minutes ago talking about the launch. They have said nothing related to this, but this mission control feed that we're getting is giving us a few clues about how they're handling this situation. They have these protocols in place. They don't want to think about something like this being a possibility, but it's a reality. It can happen. They have to have a manual. They have to have protocols for how to handle this situation, and that's exactly how they jump into it.
Right, so now you go to the afterword, if you will, in the book, and you turn the page, you follow those procedures to go from here and there. If we can turn the attention, I mean, we've obviously what's just happened, the failure, the obvious explosion of the Antares rocket in the last 10 minutes, but I'm already kind of thinking ahead that I'm thinking the International Space Station. What's our turn of the page from them that we missed this refuel and reprocess opportunity to get what they need in the International Space Station? Is there a secondary rocket, you wonder, that's backed up and ready to go then beyond that Orbital has in place too for a planned failure? Is there the backups there? Because you would think if this is a refuel
Sure, if they had to scrub the launch, if something else
exactly,
happened.
that you needed something on down, but then to have a second one of these in place, because if there's critical operations that needed to come up and refuel and replenish the space station, you would think that they got to maybe have that ready to go, but I would think it's got to come from a different facility. They just couldn't do it at Wallops from here.
And definitely they have contingency plans in place. And if you listen to this NASA TV audio feed, it appears that there is no damage to any individuals. Obviously, extensive damage to the actual rocket itself. Vehicles, property in the vicinity of the launch pad are damaged, but it does not appear, based on this NASA feed that we've been able to listen into as we show you this live footage, it does not appear anybody has been hurt, although they've got to assess all that.
Exactly. Now on the line we've got our own Dave Lucas, who's got a lot of amateur space rocketry, flight exposure, and experience too. But real quick before we get to you, Dave, here we want to note that we scrubbed the launch. NASA scrubbed the launch yesterday because there was a sailboat in range from the potential launch, and everything was scrubbed. But due to safety concerns, and as you see now in retrospect, in hindsight, thank goodness that they scrubbed the launch last night if there would have been anybody around because of a situation like this. But again, Dave Lucas, Dave, you're joining us live online. Thanks for calling in tonight. What's your side from seeing this, and anything to add to our coverage and what we just saw?
Remarkable coverage, first of all, folks. Just the fact that we were the news organization to bring this live is remarkable stuff, and your narration of it was spot on. Two things that occur to me. One is this is, first of all, a significant problem for NASA and the International Space Consortium, the ISS, International Space Station. This was a resupply mission, and it was a resupply mission that was actually running a little late to get up there. Good to see in that the double box itself right now, and the smaller the picture of that one right there. You begin to see now significant damage done to that launch complex, and that's the other thing that is so concerning about this, because this is one of a couple of places where these resupply missions can go, and obviously it's a danger zone right now. Very hot, very full of noxious chemicals. It's a real problem for what's going on in two things: in the private space consortium business, but also for NASA, which is, of course, a governmental agency. That picture, I think, is very instructive right there. Look at the char on the side of that gantry that is sort of cocked over to the side. That's what it's supposed to do. But clearly it was hit by the exploding liquid oxygen, the fuel, as it comes down. And again, while we're starting to look at the other pictures from around there, in the best of circumstances, you can't get back up on those platforms for a considerable period of time. In the old the moon missions, there used to just be tens of thousands of gallons. That's the blockhouse, too, by the way, over there that we were just looking at. That's the launch control station over there at Wallops. And so they were actually very close to the thing, and you have to think that they were rocked by the huge explosion. My point is that it's going to take a while to get out there, even before it's safe to get back on that platform and to do some sort of visual assessment of what went on. Looking at this picture, if you've ever been to the island of Chincoteague, the lighthouse to the left, or I beg your pardon, to the right over there, that's flashing in the smaller of the two pictures, and there's a look at the detonation again, and it is a self-destruct. My question is, were they able, did it happen so quickly that larger explosion right there on the ground was where they actually can detonate the rocket? When there is a catastrophic failure like that, there is a way that controllers can blow the thing apart. If it had been up, if it had been farther off the launch pad and gotten into its roll and pitch program, that's a huge bomb flying through the sky, and you obviously don't want that on any populated area. And,
sure.
And that's, my guess is that second and much larger explosion right there was not that's the failure or whatever happened, but when the thing starts falling down, and right about there, that's the detonation that my guess would be, and you can see the parts just flying from it. It at that point becomes a huge explosion, sending shrapnel everywhere. And in the smaller picture, you can continue to see the burning over there, first right along the bay side at Wallops Island, and that is almost directly across from that smaller picture, if you draw that line and go straight across, that's the town of Chincoteague, which is a population center of about 7,000 full-time residents. It's well to maybe 20,000 or so in the summertime, but this is definitely the off-season. I guarantee you that was a wake-up call for the folks living over there on the eastern shore of Virginia. And we don't want to minimize what has happened here. This is a significant setback on a lot of different levels. A huge explosion, obviously detonating and consuming the rocket, but also those supplies that were bound for the International Space Station. And now the question has to be, as we start to take a look toward the west and the setting sun there, we begin to get a little bit better idea of the actual the launch platform there, and you can see fires continue to burn right now. Guys, this is a significant problem on a lot of different levels.
And Dave, we have to keep in mind that the visitor center where people could watch this launch, and I'm sure many people came out tonight, just 4 miles from this site. They like to keep people back at a safe distance. But imagine you're in that parking lot that fills up. It's first come, first serve. They have people show up from these launch. They were probably there last night. They're scrubbed, disappointed. They come back tonight. They're sitting there and watching this happen. That is going to be a scary experience for them. And you have to be concerned as you talk about this detonation, you know, the second larger blast that we see there, if that's something that's done to protect people. And could the impact go that far? Could the shrapnel from an explosion like that do damage to people that far? That's why they keep it separated from the general public, keep you so far away in those situations. And we're just seeing on Twitter, NASA obviously evaluating. This is a crisis point for them. They're not going to put out a lot of information at this moment, but they tell us that Orbital Sciences, which is the company based here in Dulles, a local company in the D.C. area, is already evaluating its mission. They have to have protocols in place for this, as well as NASA. What happens if it goes bad? What happens if they have to scrub the launch?
Yeah, this is interesting to watch. If that was the live picture coming back in, if there was a redevelopment in the way of a fire. And so I'm kind of going back into more the immediacy where the danger zone is at this time. I mean, the incredible damage that's going to be done to the launch pad. Your facility is going to be shut down for now a matter of months. But where do we go here from? I just looked up where this rocket is propelled, and I just kind of guesstimated here, Dave, with you as you're still on the line with us, that there was a liquid propellant in the first stage. It's not necessarily liquid oxygen. That's maybe of days past. It's kind of aluminum-based oxide, another liquid. But the first stage is a liquid.
That's good research.
Yeah. Well, it's easy to do with the things at hand here. But the liquid stage at the beginning was definitely just that. But then there's a solid rocket fuel in the different stages. So that is what comes into the play that you might have seen what's then burning and going on, is that you've got these different stages. Maybe if they did explode the rest of the payload and the rocket itself, but you've got a lot of volatile stuff here.
At the two areas of flames that are at some distance from each other, and we tend to think of rockets as going straight up, but they rarely do go straight up. Even almost from the time they leave the tower, they begin to move on their orbital path. And clearly you can see from the picture, the smaller picture on the left there, a significant distance between those two places where there is considerable fire, particularly there on the left side of the picture. The one in the right center is at the launch pad, but there's a significant amount of fire on Wallops Island. Wallops Island, if you don't know, has the history of being one of the very first places from which the American space program sprang. Back in the 1950s, when NASA was first set up, they looked for a place where they could launch rockets, where, of course, then the Soviet Russia was the big concern. You didn't want spies and fifth columnists be able to see where they were going. They looked at a couple of places, and one of which they hit upon was right there at Wallops Island. And as you drive past that visitor center just right across from the Wallops Flight Facility, which for a long time was a Navy facility where they trained people in guided missile cruisers. There is a old Mercury capsule on top of a much smaller rocket, and it was in that Mercury capsule that they sent up Ham, the monkey from Wallops Island, and if you ever saw that great movie, The Right Stuff, when the Mercury astronauts were named, they were sort of the joke of the test pilot corps because a monkey beat them into space. Well, that monkey was sent off from Wallops Island. And so there's a long history of space there, but only within about the last 5 years has Wallops been thoroughly reinvigorated by the injection of a great deal of money, most of it private funds, a lot of it from Orbital, this company that's involved here, and they sought to make this sort of the private spaceport, if you will, and that's sort of where we are right now. Those plans dealt a significant setback by this explosion this evening.
And we've got to recap what's happening here. If you're just joining us, just after 6:22, this rocket launch, the Antares Rocket, it's a mission to the International Space Station, a resupply mission to get these supplies up to the astronauts up on the International Space Station. A failure, catastrophic failure during launch. This is an unmanned rocket, no one aboard, and at this point, NASA is saying there is no loss of life associated with this incident right now. But as you can see from the video we've been showing, the live footage from NASA TV, there is significant property damage here. Obviously, the loss of the rocket as well as extensive damage to the launch pad itself. Orbital Sciences is the company that is involved in this launch based out in Dulles. They are also tweeting on Twitter. They have said this is a vehicle anomaly. They're going to update as soon as possible. But incidents like this blow up on social media immediately. Twitter goes crazy. Pictures, people wanting to know what the situation is. Lots of people listening into that NASA TV feed as they zero in on exactly what they do now. And in those moments, right after that explosion that you're seeing right there, they started to nail down the protocol for how to handle this. You see it goes right to the protocol for this, how to handle the insurance of dealing with this situation, telling the people in mission control to lock down any data, any photos, anything associated with this particular launch so that they can preserve this moment in time. So when they go back and try to figure out exactly what happened, everything will be in place the way they needed it.
Right. Stay in place. Just hold steady. Make sure everything's working, that you can get the data, that you can get everything in place. And after everybody's sitting there and you get into this protocol of the aftermath, the first things first is safety. As you'd mentioned, there is a group of people. There's a visitors center just a few miles away looking at this. As Dave mentioned, you've got Chincoteague Island and the town and the community not far away. Are there volatile hazards coming in from the liquid fuel in the first stage, or even the solid fuel boosters? Are there things that could be burned in the atmosphere? The direction that the winds are blowing here today, which is south. So the wind's blowing south to north. Is there a problem? Are people in line for something if that smoke would be in the way?
You make a real good point, and I'm looking at the replay of it right now, and look at the billowing smoke. First of all, it's just an absolute cauldron of flame. But there you get a better sense of that plume of smoke. And Devin, as you correctly researched, it's that the liquid rocket fuel, but then it's the solid rocket fuel in there that really is combusting, and that's the one that from an environmental standpoint, I think there has to be some concern about folks downwind from that situation.
And I went back and looked, and so the first stage, again, my initial kind of with the liquid oxygen. Modern days, they just shorten into a rocket propellant 1. It's more of kind of a kerosene mixed liquid and even a liquid oxygen in that liquid first main stage. But that solid fuel, there is what they say there's some sort of could get to the official names, but an aluminum oxides and of sorts, it's almost like a gel, a putty, if you will. And those probably in the amateur rocketry business would maybe more able to easily explain that type of propellant. It might be similar to what you find in those rockets that you can buy at your average ordinary store. Obviously it would be on a much powerful scale, probably different conjectures or combinations of what's in there. There's something I also want at this point too, Dave, with on the line. What is the history of this particular rocket coming from Orbital? And as I've gone back and done a little bit of research as well, it looks to me that they've had 5 successful launches of this particular or 4 successful launches up until now. So you were 4 for 4, and this was only the 5th one that they launched of the Antares variety here. So they'd had 4 successful ones going back to the first one, I believe, if my data is correct, into April of 2013. So it's only been about 1 full year to a year and a half since they've launched these particular rockets, and now the 5th one in their whole lineup is the Catastrophe that we've just experienced now.
And that says to me, too, that they're immediately going to have to ground the rest of that rocket fleet, because you think back about the catastrophic failures, and I had to smile a little bit when they talked about a vehicle anomaly, which is only NASA could call such a spectacular failure, something as mundane as that, but be that as it may. In the other times when there have been horrible tragedies involving manned spaceflight, for example, what it did was it set the entire program back, not just months, but in some cases years, and at the very beginning of the Apollo program, it set it back almost a decade from what they originally had thought was going to be the timetable. Probably not like this, but you talked earlier about the protocol of mining all this mountain of data that they have to try and figure out what went wrong, to sort of reverse engineer this terrible situation, and then look at the other Antares rockets and perhaps the design of the whole thing and say, wait a minute, have we missed something here?
And Dave, when they do these investigations, these are not quick turn investigations. They sometimes can take months or years to put together. Sometimes they will go out and seek experts, put out congressional panels in the case of loss of life to really evaluate what went wrong here. And you said it sets the program back. It absolutely does. And want to update you now. We're hearing from NASA officially on Twitter and social media. They say that the agency and Orbital Sciences gathering data on the failure of the CRS-3 mission. This happened just 6 seconds after launch tonight. The launch scheduled to go off at 6:22. Jay Bolton, NASA's spokesperson, tells CNN there was a failure on launch. Obviously, what we've seen there, he says, no indicated loss of life, significant property and vehicle damage. Mission control, as we've heard on the NASA TV channel, trying to assess exactly what went wrong, and that process is not going to be something we see happen quickly. Once they lock down the data, once they start interviewing people, they're going to look at all the matrix behind this and evaluate exactly what happened.
If you will, and Dave, with you live on the line, I want to go back to that last night when we thought tonight, the viewing, the clouds, last night, everything was clear. The reason for which last night was scrubbed was that there was a sailboat out just off the coast there. And that was in the range of where this rocket is fired. Now, Dave, you mentioned earlier, you questioned this. Now, the thing here, I'm going to get into some of the kind of the physics, the science behind this. You say that the rocket does not launch vertically, almost, if you will, straight up and down. You're exactly right. Because the way that the Earth rotates, if you will, if we look at this from space, we're rotating counterclockwise, if you will. So the Earth is kind of spinning to the east. So being at Wallops Island, why our launch facilities are on the east coast, is because we're getting a little slingshot, if you will, from the spin of the Earth. So that rocket is actually launched a little bit off to the east, pointed in that direction. So last night being scrubbed, you had that sailboat downrange from this, for this very, very instance, that everything is going to fall into the ocean, that it's going to fall away from the coast, from the population, from where people are going to be. So you think about this, well, why did we scrub this? It's kind of hokey, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal.
Said,
one sailboat, that's going to be a deal. But you look at everything going into play, everything is falling into the Atlantic Ocean from Wallops, and had that sailboat been there tonight, or anybody had been in that downrange environment tonight, I could only imagine.
And we're not aware of what they were.
Right. I will not bore you further, but let me end with this. We spend a lot of time at Chincoteague, my family and I, and a couple of times when they would make a smaller launch from Wallops, and it was usually just a ballistic thing, just a small rocket that didn't go very far out, nor was it supposed to go particularly high. It was just a sort of an engine test kind of a thing. We'd get in the boat and we'd go sit there, and it was a very well patrolled, safe area that you couldn't go past. But you would watch that thing, and it was a small deal, and with not the tremendous amount of fuel and incendiary material on board that the Antares had, and you watch that thing go up and out so fast and then plunge into the water, there's no question that you can't have a vessel out there, because God forbid that it happened with that, because it would have not been something that it was just spectacular. There would have been loss of life involved.
It's just amazing. And this ship, this rocket, was carrying 5,000 pounds of supplies. We're not exactly sure what was on it. Obviously, they keep a close eye on what supplies need to go up the International Space Station. Weight is a concern. They have to be very specific about what's needed, what they put on the rocket. And that's also a concern when you have a failure like this, an explosion, and what is on board. They have to be careful of that as well. NASA obviously contracted this job out to Orbital Sciences, that company based here in Dulles, as well as California-based SpaceX. And this is the first disaster in that effort. And Dave, you know, we've watched these rocket launches for years. We've become used to them. But I think you almost know when something has gone wrong. You recognize, even though we're not experts in this field, you recognize that something has gone wrong. You see immediately that something is amiss, because we've seen these rocket launches so many times over the years.
It was interesting to listen to the two of you, and that's what I was doing, because I was going to watch this and then run outside on the deck and see and look toward the southeast sky and see if I could see this thing. But it was apparent almost from the beginning, and I think Devin probably was the first to realize that there was some sort of a problem, even before we saw the thing detonate. And it didn't take long. 6 seconds after liftoff is just an excruciatingly short period of time. And I'm sitting here staring at the images of it transfixed. It is a remarkable and terrible thing, not just for the sort of the awe of it, but as we've been talking about for some time, this was a resupply mission to the International Space Station. There are astronauts on board that space station right now, and it's not as if there are 3 or 4 rockets sitting around someplace that they can immediately move into the queue and send up to resupply. That's going to have to there are going to have to be some pretty sharp calculations made on food and water and supplies and all that sort of thing, because there are people involved in space, and this was supposed to get up there and be a supply mission to them to help them out.
Right, which I mentioned earlier, Dave, is that kind of leads just looking ahead then past the tragedy of the rocket loss. What about the necessities that they have to have for the resupply? Who's going to then follow up? Is it a different company? Is it a different country that comes into play, because it is international that's going to help supply that? So that's going to be an interesting question we're going to have to try to answer there coming another time. The interesting thing, I sit here with a lot of emotion watching this, and obviously it's an unmanned rocket, but I can't help that the emotions running in me. In my generation, and I was a young child, but something I watched like this happened 3 decades ago.
The Challenger.
And the Challenger.
Absolutely.
And it just comes into mind, and the emotion obviously was quite different. Christy McAuliffe, the school teacher at the time, but just the similarity immediately to me as I watched this live, that was almost one of the first things that flashed up my mind, and the emotion that kind of erupted there.
And you know, it just shows you that no matter how predictable these scenarios are, how predictable they try to make them at NASA and the engineers behind these launches, there are some factors you cannot control, and as a result you will get accidents like this. Tragic ones in terms of the cost of an experience like this, the rocket, the supplies, the launch pad itself. The damage, we are told, per NASA is extensive, although there is no loss of life with this.
That's the best news. That's the best thing we can have.
And in this age, people are demanding answers already. They want to know what went wrong. NASA and Orbital Sciences, the company involved in this, are going to be hard-pressed to come up with explanations for exactly what happened here quickly, although, as Dave was alluding to earlier, this is a lengthy process. When something like this happens, everyone goes into freeze mode, they lock it down and try to piece it together moment by moment and look at what failed in the science leading up to this.
I can probably tell you from the weather end, from my expertise here and everything I've been watching, is that there would be a very minimal probability that weather could have come into play with this. Again, knowing across the region the general wind structures were from the south breezes today, we got temperatures well to the 80s northern Virginia, out closer then towards the eastern shore, out towards the Delmarva, obviously where Chincoteague is. Guesstimating here without going back and looking at all the data, but temperatures probably well within the 70-degree range, a light southerly breeze, but no rain that I could see of that was all in play. The lightning probability, maybe that's something like that, or static electricity or something that could have come into play. From my vantage point, there had to have been something inherent, what they're already saying, a vehicle anomaly. So then outside influence is something coming into that, an extremely low probability.
And we want to thank Dave Lucas for his time with us on the line and lots of experience in this area, very skilled in aviation and all of these things. So Dave, thank you very much for your time. We want to recap for everyone.
My
Just
pleasure.
after 6:22 today, the Antares Rocket, which was scheduled to go up on a resupply mission to the International Space Station, exploded just 6 seconds after launch. NASA very clear about this. They do not believe there was any loss of life related to this explosion. This is an unmanned rocket, although it was carrying 5,000 pounds of supplies up to the International Space Station, and much of it coordinated, this effort, by a Dallas-based company that I'm sure tonight, instead of celebrating, is now analyzing and is in just the beginning stages of what is now a full-scale investigation into what caused this failure that NASA at this point is blaming on a vehicle anomaly.
And at this point, NASA and between the government and private, it's going to be Orbital that we hear that's getting together. They're going to have a press conference determining on where they're going to make those final announcements, where they go from here. But Orbital's going to take care of that. We'll monitor their tweets to see when that press conference will be here. And as we do often on News Channel 8, we'll probably try and take that live, if not have more reports later tonight and tomorrow.
And we are going to continue to follow this breaking news right